Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest local council focus webinar, Connecting Communities with Microsoft Dynamics 365. My name is Gareth Boyle, the Marketing Manager for Microsoft here at Fusion 5, and I'm joined today by Ross Poulton, Practice Manager for CEC, Roshni Gondia, Business Application Specialist at Microsoft, Philip Matthew, Senior Consultant for CEC, and Brad Orders, Principal Consultant for CEC. We have a jam-packed session today covering all the latest things from Microsoft within local government across ANZ. But before we kick things off, just a few bits of housekeeping. The first portion of today's session will give you a little bit of background on what Fusion 5 and Microsoft is doing in the local council space, followed by a live demonstration of Dynamics in action from Phil and Brad. To finish up, we'll have a brief Q&A, so if you do have any questions during the presentation, you can ask them via the top right-hand corner of your browser or Teams application. In addition, we'll also share a recording of the event after it is concluded. Now, with that out of the way, let's kick things off with our first presenter, Ross Poulton. Ross.
Thank you, Gareth, and good morning, everybody. Great to see you all online and coming along to see what we've been doing with Dynamics 365 for local government today. So just very briefly, a little bit about who we are first, and we'll hand over to the product guys, which will be much more exciting, I'm sure. So Fusion 5 is owned and run here in Australia and New Zealand, and our team are onshore, including in the room with me today, ready to talk about some of the great work we've done with Dynamics with local governments. We're a full service consultancy. We've got advisory services, design and implementation, QA, quality assurance, perhaps most importantly, change management as well as part of our service offering. We've been working over the last few years with local government and councils in urban environments, suburban, regional centres, all across the eastern seaboard of Australia and across the ditch in New Zealand as well. Our projects have all been focused on improving the relationship that you as local council teams have with your ratepayers, your residents and other stakeholders. We've helped build self-service portals for residents to get information and undertake key service delivery. We've streamlined customer service approaches to highlight concerns residents are likely to have, such as waste pickups that are being missed as soon as the phone rings without going looking for that information. And we've helped with planning of large-scale road closure management for public events and building works as smoothly as possible. And working closely with those leaders as they go along the journey has been very professionally rewarding. So some of the stuff you're about to see has been incredibly well received by users within council as it's been rolled out. Hearing gasps and applause as we show new systems to clients is a lot of fun to hear, but it also shows how much we can transform the user experience using Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. So I won't hold you up for too much longer. I'm pretty excited for you to see some of the work that we've done today. And that's going to be demonstrated by Phil and Brad, who are the team that have built that, working with local government teams over the last few years. So to get that conversation started, I'll hand over now to Roshni Gondia, Business Application Specialist at Microsoft, to hear a little bit more about what they're doing in this space here in Australia. Thanks, Roshni.
Thanks so much, Ross. Nice to have you all on. So thank you so much for taking the time. As Ross mentioned, I'm Business Application Specialist at Microsoft. I'm working specifically for local government and have been doing so for a while. So and a space that's really, really exciting and something I have a huge passion in. I'm just going to share my screen on my slides. I'm going to take you through a bit around the point of view that Microsoft has for local government. And that's going to be followed on by the technical demonstration to kind of support some of the vision that we have. So this will be for the next 10 minutes. Just with regards to the point of view that we have on local government, the motto that I've always shared with local councils is think big and start small. So I think it's great to have this 3-year roadmap, this grand vision, and where exactly you want to go. But what I really recommend doing is picking out those core use cases, those big bugbearers that really keep you awake at night, and start to work out exactly what use cases and what services within the council you can start to digitize. So when we work with councils, it's typically around the waste, it's typically around kind of customer service requests that you'll see later on. So it's some of those real core kind of council services. If I just go to some of those bullet points there, it's really around improving that customer experience with the 360-degree view. So it's having that visibility of exactly who your citizens are. So if Roshni calls into a council, she calls about a parking permit, a beach permit. How do you actually have that visibility on exactly who Roshni is? And a big part of this is really focusing on customers, so not just the ratepayers. We know you've got incumbent systems like TechOne and Civica, but those systems really make you look at citizens as ratepayers and people who are just paying their rates. But what we really recommend is how to look at those people as customers and start to profile them. And a lot of the councils that are within the region, they don't necessarily have just their ratepayers who are visiting the region. They also have a lot of customers coming outside. So it's really good for councils to actually have that full view. I think the third point, apologies, the third point is really important because I think that improving the employee experience is really underrated when it comes to talking about technology. So this is really around how do we make employees' lives easier? How do we make it more simple for them and actually allow them to do their job a lot better and consolidate some of those processes and systems? Part of that will be improving the cost efficiency. So we know typically with councils is they do look at kind of piecemeal solutions. So there is a problem, they have a solution and they fix it with one specific solution. But is that solution necessarily going to reduce that total cost of ownership? And is it really going to actually help you become agile and amend things when needs to be amended within a council? The second last point is really around that reallocation of workforce to focus on innovation. So a big myth is that, you know, technology is really going to displace people and not allow them to do their job. But what this really means is how do we actually allow the workforce to focus on innovation and not just sit and keep the lights turned on and be paid to do so? How can we actually allow them to utilize their skills and capabilities and focus on with what the council actually needs around innovation? Finally, the last point is around remaining relevant and attracting talent. I know this is a huge concept for councils. We often hear around words which you'll hear in this deck actually around AI and some of the big buzzwords, but what does that actually mean for councils and how can it be relevant to you and how can you almost operate in a similar way to private organisations and commercial organisations would and start to become the place that people actually want to come and work and just become a bit more relevant to all of your stakeholders around you. I'm just going to take you through a couple of examples of some of our councils who have used the Microsoft platform. I won't go into one in each depth, but I'm happy for you to follow up with either Microsoft or Fusion 5 on this, and we can talk to you a bit more around some of the core work. But if I take Penrith City Council, for example, they have taken the think big and start small motto very literally. And they started off with waste management. So they just simply couldn't manage the volume of queries that were coming in for waste. So they started to digitize that and they actually used Dynamics to capture a lot of those interactions within there and gave the ability for people to complain about a lost bin, a stolen bin, a defected bin. And using that, they proved the value out of Dynamics and then they started to digitize all of their other citizen-facing services. So kind of pothole management, customer requests, pool inspections. They've looked at field services, so managing some of those fields and the agents. I can roll off quite a lot as to what they're doing, and they're now looking at revamping their finance system as well, because Dynamics doesn't just do the front end, but it does the back end. So Manningham Council and Hornsby Council, again, have used Dynamics to its core and just looked at having that 360-degree view of citizens. I'll just finish off this slide by talking about Bundaberg, and that's because that's our Power Platform. So when I talk to you about Dynamics, it's it's around kind of very off-the-shelf applications that Microsoft have built and maintained. But the Power Platform really gives you the opportunity to create applications that are not necessarily pre-built. And this for me is amazing for councils because you have such nuanced processes and such kind of distinctive service processes within the council. I think this is such an amazing opportunity for you guys to get your hands dirty, essentially, for both business and IT. So some of the use cases there has been to streamline pet registration. It's been to kind of manage financial hardship. We've had it to manage some expense management within council. Knox Council has used it for kinder enrolment. So there's a whole heap of cases that you can use the Power Platform for. I just wanted to talk to you about two key councils that are quite close to my heart because they've been quite recent successes of ours. So Hobson's Bay Council, very similar challenges to a lot of what the councils we're speaking to today have. So around that 360-degree view, the disparate systems, manual processes, and community and organisation members having very little visibility on any developments and very high overheads. So they had Computron as an existing system, so we've built the integration for them. And part and parcel of that is completely revamping like the way they manage cases, registrations, events, field knowledge bases, and integration of legacy systems. I'm aware I've only got 10 minutes for this, so I'm going through it a little bit quick. City of Joondalup have done a full end-to-end platform replacement. So they've actually done a Tech One replacement. So they are now looking to use Dynamics for not just the front-end customer-facing stuff that I just mentioned Hobson Bay did, but they're also revamping the finance and operations side of it, and they are using a property and rates calculator to manage all of this. So this is a huge flagship customer of ours. I'm just going to finish with two last slides. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the platform, I won't go into too much depth on it, but essentially the bottom is the grey part, the three boxes. And all I want to say on this point is that it's a platform. So the point is that it's all on Azure, it's all integrated into one. And this is really where the cost savings start to come. So if you look at like security, management, compliance, all of, I hate to say it, but what I consider the boring stuff, that's actually all automated. And so the people that you're paying to keep those lights on and manually manage these core processes, they're all automated and built into one platform. If we look at the box above, it's a productivity and collaboration suite. So that's what I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Again, the point here is that your data is in one place. It's all there. It's just a case of what do you do with it. And this is where we start to look at like AI and Copilot, which I hope you've heard, but that's really around how we kind of structure some of that data and actually try and sift through that and start to get some intelligence from it and have a productive way of working, but that's all embedded in all of our applications. I'll just finish on the top boxes. So the business applications piece on the right-hand side, or sorry, left-hand side, which is what I specifically cover. And this is the Microsoft applications that have been built and managed and maintained by Microsoft, spanning what you'll see today is probably more around the customer service piece, which is this. So really around streamlining that service delivery, managing some of those cases, routing those cases correctly to the specific agents. And then we also talk about kind of field service as well, which is really managing some of those agents out in the field. I appreciate sales and supply chain is not as applicable to local government, but it's nice to know that we do have that capability. And even for like sales, we can use that for economic development teams. So when they have wanting to have visibility of some of those local businesses that they want to target, or some of those businesses in the region that are new and up and coming, that's when we can look at starting to use sales. And then you see the low-code Power Platform. So I did mention that before, so I won't go into depth, but that's just there for you to know that there's an opportunity for you to create applications as well. This is just a bit of a slide on specific use cases within local government that I see being relevant. So I split this up into customer engagement and finance and operations. Sorry. So a lot of the customer engagement is around portals, field service, building applications, licensing and permits, and the waste piece. And then finance and operations, which is kind of around the core accounts receivable, payable assets as well, which I know will be big for councils. Yeah, I'm just going to finish on the AI slide. I've got a video here to show you. Are we okay for time, guys? Do you mind? This is like a 1-minute video.
Go for it, Rosh.
Okay. This is just a bit of an introduction into Copilot, so I'll start this for you.
9 out of 10 workers said that automation and AI-powered tools would help them focus on meaningful work. Introducing Microsoft Dynamics 365 Copilot, AI-powered assistance to get more done with less effort and take on the tasks that keep you from the work that matters. From summarizing meeting notes, complete with action items and follow-up dates, to helping you get started with emails and content. Whether you're a seller following up with a proposal, a marketer promoting a new product, or a service agent providing world-class customer support, Copilot is there when you need it to suggest responses, documents, and ideas in the moment, and get help just by asking in a conversational way. Copilot features can help write a compelling product description for online stores, or help find the right audience simply by typing who they want to reach. Copilot can even help with your supply chain by predicting risks before they become a problem, provide clear steps to take action. Copilot is built into Dynamics 365 using artificial intelligence developed responsibly by Microsoft, empowering employees to deliver better customer experiences and drive efficiency across the organization. Dynamics 365 Copilot, the world's first AI copilot in both CRM and ERP.
So yeah, a bit of a video there. I appreciate that's very American. So what I've got on the next slide is, sorry, took me off presenter mode there. It's just some examples around, God, it's taken me to the beginning. Sorry about that. Just some examples of exactly how Copilot can be used within Dynamics. So I'll take you through those specific cases. Here we go. So just in the interest of time, I just want to focus on the customer service piece. So when we look at Copilot within Dynamics, it's around really creating those customer responses. So when you've got those agents within the contact center, how do they start to, automate those responses? How do they start to populate those fields based on a lot of the typical queries that are coming in? This is really going to allow them to really accelerate that information discovery. So when they do get those citizens calling in, how do they start to sift through some of that information and actually really start to find the right answer? And then we've got like self-service chatbots. So I'm sure a lot of you kind of get a lot of the same questions when it comes to citizens calling in. And how do you enable that self-service and streamline it a lot better and just have a chatbot on the other end answering some of those questions that don't necessarily need human intervention. So I'm happy to circulate this. Fusion 5 will happy to circulate this after if you want to look at these examples in more depth. But there really is that kind of addition and investment in AI and Copilot, and Microsoft have definitely dominated the market share in this capacity. When it comes to a lot of the other vendors in the market. So I think this is such an exciting space to be in. And, hopefully local councils can really see the value in it as well. That's the end of my slides. Thank you so much for listening to that. I hope you found that valuable. I am going to pass over to Phil now. Thank you so much.
Very good. Well, hi, everyone. So thanks for that, Roshni. So we'll dive right into it. So where I wanted to start with was around some of the guiding principles and challenges that helped us put together this solution that we're going to be taking you through today. And it was kind of focused more on those sort of very low-level challenges that we felt councils across the board generally were going to be faced with. So the first was around the ever-evolving customer expectations. So now more than ever, the people within your communities more educated about government services, more opinionated about the role of council, more demanding for a good and personalized digital engagement, and generally more aware and protective of online data as well. And all of these things tend to drive the expectations of how council needs to operate and interact with their community. The second challenge was around structuring what is currently what we felt was unstructured data. So how do we manage all the unstructured data? How do we handle multiple requests of the same type? How do we identify complex locations to deliver a particular service? So as an example, I work at a council, I live in the council, and I have preferences around communicating with me as a staff member and not as a resident. How do I handle that? A pothole on a road, which property is that really related to? How do I send a service delivery team to the right location? And a very commonly reoccurring event as of late, a storm hits Melbourne and 100 cases are raised about a branch on a freeway. How many service requests do we raise and how do we access that information? Whether councils or whether anyone here has an opportunity to go full greenfields or is really just remodeling their data, building a robust customer data model in the way that we will see today, it makes the various parts of the customer data friendly and accessible where it's required by users and other systems alike. And so what Fusion 5 have put together, I feel goes a long way in providing a framework for this, and hopefully you will all feel the same after having seen that. The third one was around the disparate and legacy systems. So the challenge was really around the difficulty in getting all of that information into one place. Particularly with councils, you've got legacy platforms, older systems, and that can be outdated in both design, but also in the user experience that many of our staff expect. A disconnection across systems, so a very siloed nature to how different departments are using systems and transferring information across the council. And generally the technical challenges that come with trying to deliver a more modern service, requiring real-time data, making it accessible when and where we need it. And then the final challenge was around the resistance to change. Councils are one of those long-running institutions where people do spend big parts of their career in. Legacy tools will create a level of comfort with these people. So why change if they're familiar and comfortable with what's working? Processes are baked into how people work, whether they're optimized processes or not. People feel that level of comfort with it. And then also that general siloing of information, which I'm sure everyone has experienced at some point. And so that creates that general question of, well, why change? If it's working now for me, why should I change? And so we have that organizational change piece that we need to consider. So whilst few in number, these challenges specifically, we felt run quite deep in many councils, and for this reason became the heart of how we've built our council solution. And so I'll hand it over to Brad to take us through some of the items that we'll be covering. I'll be joining in to contribute as well on a few points, but hopefully by addressing these challenges, you'll start to see how this solution that we've put together really fits the bill.
Great, thanks, Bill. Great. I think that's an echo. How's that?
Better, thanks, Brad. Wait, it's not better. You've been muted. Just unmute again for me there, Phil, please. Thanks.
Okay. How's that?
Much better. Thanks, Brad.
Lovely. Thank you for the heads up. So we'll be just talking about how we've developed a local government accelerator to handle some of these challenges that we found across local government. One of the great things, the next slide, please. One of the things that we've encountered everywhere is that with local councils, the challenge is that we have a push for a customer charter or a customer promise. We want to be a customer-centric service in what is fundamentally a location-centric industry. Council looks after spaces and properties, and a lot of their services are very targeted around areas and locations. But there's now a push, a demand that we are very customer-centric. If we've got a system, a legacy system that's say 15 years old, it's going to be very much riveted in a location-centric service provision way of doing things. How do we make sure we're meeting our customer promise when our systems aren't built for it? So one of the ways that we've been doing that is by unpicking a single record to represent every single thing about a request. So I'll probably jump in and grab my screen. So traditionally, we've had a record for a request. This one record is somehow supposed to encompass our promise to the customer with timelines and expectations, but somehow it's also expected to manage the work that we're providing as well. Two things at once. Now, they're two very different things we're trying to manage here. So the challenge is, how do we take that? How do we split that out? So to show you the approach that we've taken, if we say have a phone call that's come in about the pothole that Phil was talking about previously, we have the option of saying, what topic is it about? If we type in pothole, it's in road maintenance. Now, this is actually a really good point, because the people who are on the phones, our customer service officers, don't need to know the organisational structure of council to record an inquiry. They just need to know what it's about. So by recording that it's a pothole, We can see here that we know it's a service request. It belongs in this category and subcategory. It's a road maintenance type, and then all we need to do is just put in the location. All of the things that we need for analysis, for managing our services, all the kind of slicing and dicing that we want to do, that's all handled in the background just by knowing that it's a pothole. So this is a fundamental way, particularly if you've got new staff, a great way of making sure that everything is tagged appropriately. And that's from the request type. If we know that road maintenance is the request type, we can infer certain things. If it's a pothole request, if it's about bad road surface, we may know that it takes 30 minutes to actually fill a pothole, but there may be a 4-week backlog in the amount of potholes we've got. So now we start unpicking those two types of problems that we're solving. If I have a look at the request type record, what's going on behind the scenes, we can actually see that knowing that it's road maintenance, we can infer a whole lot of information. In this case, I've said it takes 1 hour to look after a pothole, but there's a 30-day backlog. That's really important. So we can actually tell the customer, generally, you should expect this is going to be addressed in 30 days. That means for 30 days, they shouldn't be calling council saying what's going on with this pothole. But we know that when the service starts, it should be finished within an hour. So for our service delivery areas, we can measure, are you meeting your target of 1 hour? Is that 1 hour target appropriate? But we can manage our customer promise separately. Really important there. Now we can start to say, are we living up to the customer promise? And are we delivering our services effectively? Two different questions. So we've got our phone call, which now goes over to a case as the next step in its evolution. We've decided we need work done. So that's the case. This manages the customer promise and the customer experience. So straight away, we can see that we've got some visual flags here. It's really important that people don't have to go looking for information. We've got lots of information spread all over the place. In this scenario, we can see that we've got flags saying that the person, Chris, has a preferred name and that he's actually a counsellor. So we need to take special care when dealing with Chris. We can see that there's a dangerous dog on the premises. It's a steep driveway and they are eligible for bin collection and hard waste, which is also really important for some of our services. So now that we've been able to split this off and say this is representing how the customer is going to be managed, we have an estimated completion date for the customer. When it gets down to the work order itself, though, that gets created off this, I've got a 30-minute one here. The information is copied across. The work order is what goes to the service delivery area. This is how they manage their work. So once this work is in the system, it now needs to be allocated. The great news is through Dynamics, we've got field service, we've got mobile workforce management built in. So just going straight here, we've got a number of crews available from road maintenance, street sign and waste management. We've got a few jobs already. Now we've got this unscheduled work down here that needs to be scheduled. I'm going to schedule it to myself personally because as we can see, the road maintenance crew is kind of busy at the moment. It's just a drag and drop. Who needs lunch? I'll work through my lunch break and I'll get this pothole done. It knows where I'm located. It knows where the job's located. It knows I'm only 5 minutes away, which is fantastic. So having that visibility means that if someone has to travel, you're not going to overbook them in something that's just unrealistic. So at this point, the work order is now assigned to me just by that dragging and dropping. On my mobile phone, which got a Windows version on here, I can see that for my daily agenda, I've got 2 items, and I'm going to go to this one here and have a look. Got to refresh. Helps if you refresh. What I'd like to do is to have a look at my map. So I've got two jobs that need to be done today. One is in progress, and straight away I can see here that at Hilton Crescent, there's a job which I need to go to. I can get directions. If this was on my phone, I would be hooking into whatever map product I'm using. So if you prefer Google Maps, it'll bring up Google Maps. To get more information about the job, it's really easy, just hit View Details, and it will go through and show me information about the booking. Now, this is getting us to a certain point which works well for, say, people who are out in the field. But what about a more specific example? We can take this as a foundation of information and push it further. One thing we've done with council is use this for hard waste bookings for trucks. A hard waste truck is a very expensive asset to move, so you want to make sure your kilometres are low. And we have a Canvas app that we've got on the rubbish trucks that tell them in a very simple way where their next job is and how to get there, mounted on a tablet inside the truck. Really, really simple. I might just actually go straight to the PowerPoint from here. Mm-hmm. So the app is as simple as this. You say which truck you're in. It shows you the route to the next job. You then say, if you didn't pick it up, why you didn't pick it up. And you can then tap and take a photo. It really is that straightforward. The concerns with council was that the app was going to be complex and get in the way of them doing their job. So we worked very closely with the employees to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. And the feedback has been fantastic. Okay, so now that we've got this information in, we know about our friend Chris on the phone call, and we've got some basic information here. We're starting to build a customer profile. This then opens the door for us to have things like customer portals and self-service, so that people don't even need to contact council directly. They can do so online, all based upon getting our foundational data structure done. Hey, want to jump over?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I'll hand over to Phil. Thank you.
All right. So to Brad's point, this is one of those areas that I get oddly excited about, because when it comes to the data model, this pretty much underlies everything that you've seen, everything that that we generally do within the solution, and I think is true for the most part when you have any systems in place. Getting the initial customer data modeling correct is really important. And so before we go into those actual records, I did just want to put this visual up there so that at least intuitively, so for those that perhaps aren't as familiar with all the ins and outs of the Dynamics product or the Power Platform, and for those that may not be as technical, understanding the philosophies and intuitions of how we've built this model will be really important. So from to start at the very bottom, so from the point of introduction of local councils, boundaries were always set using geographical lines. So as a council, you are responsible to provide some set of services to whoever and or whatever operates in that space or in those boundaries. So we use this as a guiding philosophy when we structured the data. So defining the physical space within the council's jurisdiction was the first job. So this was more of a spatial and geographical challenge rather than a customer-based one. And so Power Platform's functional locations or functional location types provided the perfect vehicle to do this, as it allowed us to create a hierarchical framework to store a collection of locations. So these are records with longitude and latitude values. And in theory, all of those locations brought together equate to all space within the council. So this also means that if you are going to extend Dynamics with spatial tools, visualization tools, this becomes possible because those long lat values are the primary data points that these systems tend to use. And so then that location information can then be categorically divided up. So using functional location types, so certain space might be residential, could be commercially developed for properties and buildings. Other locations may be your public space, so parks, roads, bodies of water. We're also able to add a slightly more configurable way to divide up land could be things like parcels, waste regions, electoral wards, which we'll see in just a moment. So this all allows us to create a layer of just simply location data. And so then we move up to the step above that, which is who or what do councils actually provide services to? And so the answer to this helps us define what do we use the account table in Power Platform for. Now, naturally, the answer is properties. That seems to be the consistent answer across councils. And this is normally where most council systems end the evaluation of that question. But what happens to all of the public space? How do we track services delivered to parks or to a road? That's not necessarily tied to a property. So injecting those kinds of locations into the account table as serviceable accounts means that we can now begin tracking service delivery at the park level, at the road level. And for those that want to go even further based on how you categorize your assets, road surface, footpaths, the median strips, we're able to build a service history for all of the different spaces across the council. The final layer that sits on top of that, obviously, is probably the most important one when it comes to engagement, is who are we actually interacting with and in what context are we interacting with them? So are they a resident? Are they a ratepayer that lives overseas? Are they a staff member that live in the LGA? So when we have all of these layers of data independently yet appropriately associated, it means that we can get what we need and in the ways that make sense. So let's have a quick look at what that looks like. So I'm just going to share another screen very quickly. Okay, so what we have in front of us is Warrigal Park. So Warrigal Park is a large park with plenty of open and public spaces, with plenty of council assets located across it and plenty of uses. And this is tagged as the entire park and or reserve. And if we open up the asset locations, which is an out-of-the-box capability with field service, we're able to build a sort of hierarchy with not just that overall park, but then all the sub-locations that we refer to as segments that combine to make up the park. The AJ Burkett Oval, the Shire offices, the playground, all of those things that sit within Warrigal Park. So for those that do know Dynamics Field Service, functional locations are the primary tool used to determine service locations on the work order. So think of the question by a field officer, which is, where is the issue at the park? If we gave them Warrigal Park, that makes it particularly difficult to find a single bench. But if we were then to say some part of the park, like the Oval, it immediately gives them a more narrowed and more specific location to go to. We're also then able to build a history of work against those specific sub-locations. We also have added a great add-on to the work order, which we will see in a few moments, around further identifying a service location. So not just give me the long lat value of that oval, but then also what if it's next to a street or in front of particular properties, and a few more attributes that essentially help the field officer identify where the location of this particular service needs to, or where this particular service needs to be delivered. So then we'll take a look at the example of a property account. So this is that layer that sits on top. Now, properties are the primary classification of locations that the council provides services to. And as you would expect, the property record stores all the normal information. So, you've got the functional location that we talked about. So what's the long lat value and the address of this property? The additional property layers that we saw, so your precinct and wards, the parcels that may be associated with that particular account, and we've got what we've also introduced is friendly names versus display names. So we may have a particular address, but the address itself doesn't mean too much. It may be the whole entire shopping strip that we may want to be referring to. So we have all that information displayed front and center. And now that we have these serviceable accounts, we can then pump it with all of this helpful information and useful data for service teams, for customer-facing teams, council users, and not just from within Dynamics, but data that also sits outside this platform, which I will allude to a little bit later. So as an example, I'm just going to open up a residential property. We've got all this information that sits now readily available for someone that requires it. We've got the case history, so all of the cases that have been raised by someone at this property or about the property specifically. So we'll see the one that that was raised a little bit earlier in the demo around the pothole in the center of the road. We have information about all of the relationships of people with this property, residents, owners, tenants, things of that nature, which can obviously be very flexible based on how the council chooses to store this information. And of course, all of those other various data points, entitlements, how many times can someone actually request a hard waste collection from the council? So we're able to track all of those, all of that entitlement data. And then of course, the great example, which I'm sure we'll refer to a couple of times, is around the bin collection, the thing that every one of us has outside the door. We get that insight into when the last time the bin was collected. We get all the exceptions when, for example, a truck out in the field says, well, we weren't able to pick it up for a certain reason. We get all of that information front and center. And nothing changes, as you saw, when we deal with residential versus commercial. One of the other things that you may have noticed is that in this particular commercial account, which is a gravel road shopping strip, again, that is a very big shopping center. So we have all of those sub-locations that we're then able to build a hierarchy around. What that also means is that now that they exist as individual serviceable accounts, we can build relationships and personal relationships with those businesses independently. So it's not a collection. We can have a very personal relationship with each of those stores rather than the overall shopping strip. Now, one of the hidden strengths as well about structuring the serviceable account layer separate to the location data is the flexibility to adapt to any of those changes that may occur. A house might get subdivided and 23 turns into 23A and 23B. Now, the land itself didn't change, but that serviceable account now becomes 2 on the same location. And storing these two things, like I was saying before, independently yet appropriately associated, means that we can accommodate for those kinds of changes. So we then talk about bringing together these legacy systems and bringing together all of this information. So one of the things that we looked at as one of those challenges is getting value from outdated systems. So I think most councils experience the reality of having lots of systems, sometimes old, sometimes new, defenders of said systems within the council, disconnection from across systems that require dependency. And particularly for the heavy lifters like property and rate systems, NAR, asset management, document management, these are the kinds of things that need to be on hand to really give a resident a high quality experience. And so the information that councils have might be amazing, but it must be available where and when it's needed. So all of what you may have seen today may be housed in Power Platform, but much of it came from these other systems. So we've achieved this through all these integration patterns using tools like Power Automate for all of our automation, Power Apps, so building these custom applications that councils may want, and even our own in-house integrations built by our I2 team, taking advantage of their expertise across technologies that go beyond just the Microsoft stack. So the reality is there is no customer service officer that would look past the value of knowing case history for a property, the last time a person's bin was missed, how many more times they can request a hard waste collection, or simply just telling them that a massive pothole outside their house is already scheduled to be taken care of. So the recommendation really is just to make sure that when you are going down this path, evaluate the viability of creating a more connected environment, as the benefits will quickly grow the more that this is focused on. So I'll pass it back to Brad to have a look at some of the case management and service management as well.
Excellent. Okay, so a couple of Phil's points I'm going to be expanding on just a touch. One of the really important things is that Phil mentioned that different people can have different relationships with council. We can also get different contact details from different systems depending on their role. So we've got our friend Amor here, who is one physical person, but has 3 separate contact personas when they deal with council. She's a staff member, a non-resident and a resident, depending on the point in time. So we could actually have someone who has a rental property in council, but also lives in another building within the same council. And what we're noticing here, excuse the resolution, it's a bit tight, is that we've got different email addresses, different mobile phones, different contact addresses, different ways of communicating with me. You know, if it's a staff matter, use my staff email, contact me directly. But if it's relating to my dog registration, use my Gmail account and call me after hours. To be able to have the flexibility to have completely different profiling with people, that's going to help us in the future with stakeholder management, as well as respecting that people want to be contacted the way that they choose. So really important, again, getting back to that customer promise. In terms of the case itself, Phil was mentioning about potholes and duplicates. One of the banes of council's existence is that multiple people report the same issue, definitely during storms, but just also during general day-to-day. For the pothole that we've got here for 10 Hilton Crescent, it's just around the corner from my house. What we can see is that we've got a number of dots here representing the potholes we already know about. Now, Hilton Crescent, 10 Hilton Crescent's there in the middle, and we can see that just to the side, there's another pothole that's been reported. So at this point, a customer service officer can say, look, if you're looking out the front of your property, is the pothole kind of to the left? And if they say yes, you can say, oh, yep, we already know about that one. The person across the road's reported it. Would you like to be notified when it's completed? This is one of the great things about the system and the model that we've got. Multiple people can report the same issue. The customer management of that whole kind of customer experience gets managed separately, but there's only one job in the system. So if 10 people report a pothole, you're not going out with an entire truck full of tar. You're going to turn up with one bucket of tar because you know it's just one small pothole. When you mark that job as complete, all the 10 people who have reported that pothole will get notified automatically in the system. So we're taking that manual step out of the process. We're getting an approved message from council to its residents. And most importantly, we're not thinking that we have to go and fix 10 potholes. Fantastic way of reducing your workload and the frustration of things being reported multiple times. And so one of the other things that I'd like to show, we're talking about our disparate systems before and how we need to bring things together so that customer support officers get to see the full picture of what's going on. From this case, if I went to the location of 10 Hilton Crescent, I can find out everything that's going on with this address. Now, with the waste management systems out there, integrating, we've got our IT team who help us integrate with those systems. We've mentioned before that we can see when the last time that the bins were collected. We can even get further information. When someone's on the phone with us, we can find out why that bin was not collected. And when people say, I put the bin out, why didn't you collect it? You know, the green bin, it didn't get picked up and I don't know why. You can actually go and have a look and say, well, it's because of what you've stuck in the green bin. And there's your opportunity to educate the resident and have a little discussion about the appropriateness of sending out a truck for another green pickup. One of the other things that we've noticed is that we're dealing with a lot of information sometimes. If you get contacted about a case and you're not quite sure what's going on with the case, again, going back to the pothole example at Hilton Crescent, there could be multiple communications, there could be multiple things going on. It can be really hard when someone's on the phone to get a summary of where we're up to. This is where Microsoft were talking about Copilot and artificial intelligence. One of the really nice things that come with the product is the ability to just ask Copilot to summarize the entire case for us. It will then go and give us an up-to-date example of what's going on. And if we wanted to, we can copy and paste that into a summary report. But it's a really nice, quick way of finding out what's going on whilst the person's introducing themselves on the phone. Okay. Phil, would you like to have a chat about change management?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Yeah, so look, just I guess to end on this note, because, you know, for all intents and purposes, we have been really focused on the technical solution, but we can't forget the people. And I fully recognize how silly I sound telling that to a room full of people from council, that we cannot forget the people. This is where organizational change management comes in. So, you know, everyone here is fully appreciative of the fact that people can be difficult. And the reality is, as we kind of alluded to, is that with transformation journeys like this, people can become the reasons for change being slowed. It can stem from a level of comfort, a level of familiarity with the set of tools, with a set of processes, and like I was saying before, the simple question of why should I change? So as part of Fusion 5's delivery, we generally recommend that councils...
Sorry, Phil, just quickly, have you got something you should be sharing in the background there?
Nothing in the background. No,
all good. Cool.
Yeah. So generally what we do recommend is that councils do take a look inwards to form appropriate strategies on managing people that are not just directly involved with the projects, but also that are affected by these projects as well. So not that immediate circle, but the circles that sit outside that. And so our in-house OCM team are experts in this area. And so if you are interested in hearing a bit more about how we deal with this, and this could be for reasons beyond just a technical implementation, obviously please do reach out to the Fusion 5 team after the webinar has concluded. So that was just the little spiel I did want to talk about. We can't forget that. So I think that wraps up where we wanted to get to as far as demonstrating what we have put together for council. We are really excited particularly by the results that we're getting from when we're implementing these things, but also philosophically, it seems to be lining up with the way that council needs to operate. So looking forward to obviously hearing from any of you, and if there are any questions, please put them into the to the chat. I think, Gareth, we now have a bit of a Q&A session if needed.
Thanks, Phil. And I think I'll pick on Brad for this first question. So just from Michael here, how do you handle dealing with existing records management systems like TRIM or CM10?
Yeah, very, very common that we're dealing with particularly TRIM/CM10 with council. Dynamics itself integrates automatically with SharePoint, which is really handy. There's an existing connector available that takes CM10 files and SharePoint files and synchronizes them. Phil actually has done some really nice work in formatting documents with appropriate metadata so that we make sure that everything goes into CM10 is tagged appropriately, and we always will know that it's going to have the right folder structure, the right metadata tags associated with it, and the right naming conventions. So taking that whole training element of enforcing people to do the right thing with document management actually gets taken off the table by the way that we integrate. And we've done this before and it works really well.
Thanks. And while you're on screen, may as well ask you the last one here. So this one's from Sarah. Can I ask what other legacy systems are common with councils that you guys have worked with?
Yeah, the usual suspects, Civica and Tech One have a big footprint depending on which state you're in. We've worked with products such as Dell Boomi, which has a few supporters out there. We do get the weird and the wonderful, but there are regulars. What we do find though is that with the Power Platform that we're using, it's really easy to hook into the existing systems, which takes the stress out of trying to take, some of these systems have been around 15 years, to try and take all of the records of 15 years worth on a Friday night and then have them in the new system for Monday morning. Often it's just not required. We can work with the existing systems, and then council can choose the pace of change that's appropriate for their work culture and their organisation. And it can be a gradual moving over as each component proves its worth. And then you evaluate, adjust, take on the next chunk, and have a slowly controlled, risk-averse transfer. It's a really nice method for digital transformation.
Nice. Thanks, Brad. I think we can wrap up there. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. If you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out directly to anyone you've heard or seen on today's call. Fusion 5 really has been doing a lot of work in the local government space across Australia and New Zealand, and has a lot of expertise to offer to help you even get the journey started. So other than that, we will share a recording of this session afterwards, but you can have 4 minutes back before your next meeting to go get a cup of coffee. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.